Hi everyone, my name is Morgan and I'm a graduate student at the University of Michigan. So today I see myself as a scientist, but I didn't always feel that way. When I was in school, I actually didn't really like science very much. I thought it was hard and confusing, and there were always other people who seemed to be better at it than I was, and so I never thought I would become a scientist. But when I went to college, I actually had this really amazing cell biology teacher, and she spent the class teaching us that our bodies are made up of trillions of cells, and within each one of these cells is its own little world filled with DNA and machines and organelles all working together to keep this cell functioning. And that we need all of these trillions of cells to work together to keep us as humans alive and moving and walking and breathing. And so I became really excited to try to understand how these tiny worlds within cells actually work and function. And so today I'll be talking to you about my research studying how cells work. And specifically, we'll be talking about how, just like humans, mitochondria can get sick too. So first, I just want everyone to think about all the different parts of your body. So you have a brain, a heart, lungs, stomach, muscle. All these different parts of your body are made up of cells. And one thing that's common between all cells is that they need energy to function. I want everyone to just snap your fingers or clap your hands. So that simple act of snapping or clapping actually requires energy for those muscle cells to make that movement. And that energy in the cell comes from an even smaller structure within that cell called the mitochondria. And here's actually a picture of a mitochondria that I took myself using electron microscopy. And so mitochondria are really important to provide energy for these cells. So what do you think might happen if the mitochondria are not working so well or are sick? What do you think might happen to those cells that need this energy? And what do you think might happen to your body that need these cells to function? So you might imagine that your cells in your body might not be too happy and might not be working so well if you don't have the energy from the mitochondria. And what we see is that sick mitochondria can actually cause a lot of different human diseases. So things like brain disease or neurodegeneration, diabetes, which is what I study. They can also cause heart disease, cancer, and types of diseases related to your metabolism. And so because of this, it's really important for us to understand why mitochondria might get sick and what cells can actually do about it. So mitochondria work really hard in the cell, making all the energy for that cell to function. And so just naturally with time, mitochondria become damaged. They become worn out. And just like animals and plants reach the end of their lifespan, mitochondria eventually reach the end of their lifespan as well. And so cells have ways to make new mitochondria, but I'm really curious about what happens when these mitochondria are damaged and what happens to these damaged mitochondria. So what might happen when a mitochondria is sick or not working as well? Like I said, mitochondria are really important for providing energy for the cell. So if the mitochondria are damaged, you might not have enough energy in that cell to actually work well. Mitochondria also release these little sparks that can cause damage to other parts of the cell as well. So it can damage other mitochondria, it can damage DNA or different parts of the cell, which can be really bad. Also, if the mitochondria are very damaged and not working, they actually release a little compound that triggers cell death or causes cell death. This compound basically says, hey, the mitochondria are too damaged, we're not working, this cell cannot continue living. And so because of this, it's really important that cells have ways to recognize and limit these damaged mitochondria so that they don't cause all of these issues within the cell. So how might cells tell when a mitochondria is damaged? The truth is, we actually don't understand this very well. This is something that scientists are researching right now. But what we do know is that cells are really good at marking mitochondria that are damaged. So they're capable of adding this little tag or protein onto the mitochondria that basically just alerts the cell saying, hey, this mitochondria is damaged, we need to get it out of here so it doesn't hurt the rest of the cell. Next, I want to think a little bit about how cells might actually be able to get rid of these damaged mitochondria after they're marked for removal. So one way to think about this is to think about how do you get rid of things that you don't want? If you have something that's broken or old, how could you get rid of it? So some of the common ways that we get rid of things are we throw something out, so we just toss it in the trash, or we recycle it or find a way to reuse it. Cells are really awesome because they can actually recycle these sick mitochondria. And they do this through a process called mitophagy or mitochondrial autophagy. And so what this stands for is if you break down the word autophagy, it actually stands for auto, self, and phagy, eating. So this literally means mitochondrial self-eating, which means that within the cell, it can actually recycle its own mitochondria, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. And so I want to talk a little bit about how this internal mitochondria recycling, or mitophagy, actually works. So just like how we recycle things, first, these damaged mitochondria are tagged for removal. And then a recycling truck comes around and picks up these damaged mitochondria. In the cell, this recycling truck is called the autophagosome. Next, the recycling truck will then take the damaged mitochondria to the recycling plant, which in the cell is an acidic structure called the lysosome. And so just like a recycling plant, the lysosome breaks down this damaged mitochondria into its building blocks. And this provides new material that the cell can then use to make other machines or organelles or new mitochondria in the cell. And this process is really important because just like recycling, mitophagy can conserve resources. So instead of throwing something that's damaged out, the cell is actually able to reuse those parts for other things in the cells. So this is great. Now we understand how cells are able to actually get rid of these damaged mitochondria. But you might be wondering, why does this really matter? Why does mitophagy matter? Why should I care about it? So one way that scientists try to understand if something matters is we see what happens when it doesn't work. So we'll just do a thought experiment here about what might happen if mitophagy doesn't work in a cell. So like we talked about, mitochondria eventually reach the end of their lifespan, they become damaged, they need to be removed, and if you can't do that with mitophagy, then you'll get an accumulation of damaged mitochondria. And this can be really bad because the cell isn't producing enough energy to actually function, and it can cause reduced cell function, and like we talked about, in some really extreme cases, it can actually cause cell death. So disrupted mitophagy can cause a lot of different human diseases, and some of these diseases include diabetes, brain disease, or neurodegeneration. It can cause cancer, and there's some evidence that it might actually cause shorter lifespan as well. And so because mitophagy is so important to keep cells functioning and happy, it's really important that we try to understand how mitophagy actually works. Because if we understand how it actually works, then maybe we can fix it when it's broken in these different diseases. So my research focuses on trying to understand how cells actually control mitophagy. And my lab found a protein called clexixine that actually helps control mitophagy in a few different ways. So one of the first ways this protein or small machine helps control mitophagy is that it helps mark mitochondria for recycling. And so in this role, you can think of clexixine as a worker who's coming around and flagging or tagging these damaged mitochondria for removal. We also know that clexixine has another role where it actually helps the recycling truck to reach the recycling plant. And we don't understand this role of clexixine as well, but we think that this might be sort of a mechanism that physically helps the recycling truck and plant interact, sort of like a docking or a tethering of these two things together in the cell. And so understanding how cells actually control mitophagy is really important because if we understand how mitophagy is controlled, then we can work to fix it when it doesn't work in all of these different diseases. And so fixing mitophagy could lead to making healthier mitochondria in the cell, which could help us to cure disease. So today, I hope you've learned a little bit about why mitochondria are so important for your cells and your bodies to function, and that even though sick mitochondria can be really dangerous and bad for cells in your body, Cells have this amazing recycling process called mitophagy that can help eliminate these sick and damaged mitochondria, which will protect you and your cells. So thank you for listening to my talk today. If you want to learn a little bit more about mitochondria and mitophagy or mitochondria and disease, here's a few topics that you could look up. Thank you.